All right, let's dive in. Today, we're all about the Beatles. And wow, you've given us a ton to unpack. Articles, stories, even some pretty obscure stuff. I mean, did you know the recording console they used for Abbey Road, the actual console, is up for sale?
Yeah, it's incredible. A real piece of history.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got Ringo's big hit, It Don't Come Easy. But the story behind it, with George Harrison, that's something else.
Definitely not your typical songwriting credit situation.
Plus, George played this epic prank on Phil Collins back in the day. Fake congas, tons of money involved, the whole 9 yards.
Harrison was a bit of a prankster, definitely.
So even if you think you know the Beatles, there's always more to discover.
Absolutely. Like, they're split. It wasn't just out of the blue.
Right, these sources really dig into that. There's definitely some tension brewing.
A lot of creative differences, especially between John and Paul.
Totally. You can hear it in their music. John, he was all about that raw emotion.
Help is a perfect example. Pure vulnerability.
But Paul, he leaned towards those super catchy melodies. I mean, hello, goodbye, that's just a pop masterpiece.
It's interesting, though, right? Because even with those big pop hits, John's favorite Beatles song was actually some other guy.
Yeah, that raw rock and roll energy, what do you
Yeah.
make of that?
I think it speaks volumes about what John valued in music. That primal expression, he felt like he never quite captured it again.
Makes you wonder, if they'd found a way to blend those styles, what kind of music would they have made?
Right. I mean, creative tension can be a powerful force. It pushes boundaries, leads to innovation.
But too much of it. And, well, we know how that ended.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, especially with personalities like John and Paul.
Speaking of strong personalities, let's talk about Ringo. When the Beatles split, some people doubted if he could make it on his own.
Especially as a songwriter.
Then, boom, It Don't Come Easy hits the charts. An instant classic.
And here's the thing, George Harrison was actually super involved in that song.
Wait, really? I had no idea.
Apparently, he helped with the structure, maybe even some of the lyrics. Some sources even say he might have sung on a demo version.
Wow, that changes how I hear that song. Still totally Ringo, but I can hear those little hints of George's style now.
Definitely. And there's that Hare Krishna shout-out in the guitar solo, a nod to George's My Sweet Lord.
It's like a hidden message between friends.
Exactly. Shows how powerful collaboration can be, even when you're going solo.
Ringo clearly thrived with George's support, both musically and personally.
It's a good reminder that we all need that support sometimes. Bouncing ideas off someone you trust, it can spark something amazing.
And sometimes it leads to epic pranks,
Yeah.
like the one George pulled on Phil Collins,
Oh, yeah, we have to talk about that. It all started during those All Things Must Pass sessions.
with a young and nervous Phil Collins on congas.
Nervous indeed. Apparently he messed up the part and didn't make the album.
Ouch, I bet that stung back then.
Probably. But years later, Phil Collins is a huge star, and George decides to have some fun with him.
So this prank, it's more than just a little joke, right?
Oh, way more. George made a whole fake tape with a terrible conga track.
No way.
And then he wrote this fake rejection note, like it was from the original session.
You're kidding.
I'm not. He even hired a band to record this awful conga part just to make the prank believable.
That is hilarious. And he actually said it to Phil Collins.
He did. Classic George. He loved a good laugh, and he was always incredibly generous, even with his pranks.
Okay, we've talked about John, Paul, George, and Ringo. But their impact as a band, that's a whole other level.
It's everywhere you look.
Exactly. But some of the connections are pretty surprising, like Frank Sinatra covering Yesterday.
Yeah. You have Sinatra, the king of crooners, singing a Beatles tune. That's a huge statement.
Right. Because initially, Sinatra was pretty critical of the Beatles, but even he couldn't deny the power of that song.
It's like Yesterday became this universal language. It just resonated with everyone.
And their impact wasn't just on mainstream pop. John Lennon was a huge fan of the B-52s.
Right.
Yeah. He loved Rock Lobster. He even said it reminded him of Yoko Ono's music.
Wow, that's an interesting connection. I guess it shows how open the Beatles were to different sounds.
And it reminds us that Yoko Ono, she was pushing boundaries way before punk rock even existed.
Totally. Speaking of unexpected connections, that recording console used for Abbey Road just sold for a ton of money.
Yeah, the EMI TG12345.
It's more than just a piece of equipment, though. It witnessed the creation of some of the most iconic music ever recorded.
Makes you think, what other pieces of Beatles history are out there?
Oh, tons of stuff. Signed albums, concert posters, instruments.
It's a whole world of memorabilia, and it's not just about the money. It's about that connection to this legendary band.
Absolutely. Like that Help album signed by all four Beatles.
The one that sold recently.
Yeah, the owner got those signatures as a teenager back in Liverpool.
Can you imagine meeting the Beatles, getting your album signed? That's priceless.
Definitely a piece of history. It captures that early Beatlemania, that connection they had with their fans.
Makes you wonder what other fan stories are out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, I'm sure there are tons. Little glimpses into their lives, beyond the music. It's all part of the story.
And speaking of stories, one thing that really stood out in these sources was John Lennon's views on health. He was pretty skeptical of modern medicine, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had a deep distrust of doctors and conventional treatments. He preferred alternative therapies. He even hesitated to vaccinate his son, Sean.
It's a side of Lennon we don't hear about that often.
It's a reminder that even our idols are complex individuals with their own beliefs and contradictions.
Definitely makes him more human, more relatable.
Right. And speaking of relatable, John also had a bit of a gambling problem. Apparently, his luck at the casino wasn't much better than his medical decisions.
He lost quite a bit of money over the years, didn't he?
He did. It's almost endearing, in a way. Even rock stars have their vices.
Makes you think of that story about John and Yoko ordering pizza to Elaine's.
That fancy New York restaurant.
The one? Apparently, they weren't into the fancy food and just decided to order in.
That's so John and Yoko. They did things their own way no matter what.
It's like they were saying, we're John and Yoko, we'll eat pizza wherever we want.
They didn't care about social norms. They were true originals.
Speaking of originals, John's lost weekend period, when he and Yoko were separated, there are some wild stories from that time.
Yeah, that was a turbulent period for him.
Like that incident at Lou Adler's house.
Oh, right. John trashed the place in a fit of rage.
Apparently, they had to restrain him with ropes. It's a pretty dark story.
It shows the dark side of fame, the struggles that can come with it.
It's important to acknowledge those darker chapters, too. It doesn't diminish his achievements, but makes him more human.
Exactly. It's about seeing the whole picture.
And it's interesting to contrast that with his spiritual side. He seemed to find some peace during his trips to Japan with Yoko.
Yeah, he was drawn to Eastern philosophies and spent a lot of time visiting shrines.
It's a shift from the guy who once said, God is a concept by which we measure our pain.
It shows his willingness to explore different belief systems, his search for meaning.
And Yoko, she was a big part of all this. She wasn't just his wife, she was his collaborator, his muse.
She faced a lot of criticism, often unfairly.
Absolutely. It's important to remember the challenges she faced as a woman in that era, especially as John Lennon's partner.
She was a trailblazer in her own right. Strong, independent, and always true to her vision.
It's chilling to know that she was actually warned about John's safety before his death.
Yeah, she received warnings from advisors, urging her to get him out of New York.
But John, he was fiercely independent. He didn't want bodyguards or restrictions.
It's heartbreaking to think about what might have been if things had been different.
It's a stark reminder of the vulnerability that can come with fame.
And of the challenges of balancing personal safety with the desire for a normal life.
And then there's Julian and Sean, John's sons. They both carried his legacy in their own ways.
Julian, from John's first marriage, had a complex relationship with his father, but he's spoken about the importance of preserving his music.
And Sean, John's son, with Yoko, he's become a musician himself.
Carrying on the family tradition, he's spoken about feeling a deep connection to his father's music.
It's beautiful how music can connect generations like that.
Absolutely. John's legacy lives on not just through his music, but through the lives he touched.
Speaking of legacy, did you know John Lennon also wrote books?
Yeah, in his own right. And A Spaniard in the Works, full of his wit and absurdist humor.
They were pretty groundbreaking for their time.
They were. They challenged literary norms and showcased his unique voice.
But he never published another book after those two.
Apparently, he felt the pressure of deadlines stifled his creativity.
He said the spontaneity was gone.
Yeah.
That it wasn't fun anymore.
He also mentioned relying on alcohol to get into the writing mindset, which wasn't something he wanted to continue.
He realized the joy was gone, and he didn't want to force it.
It's a good lesson for any artist. Sometimes stepping away is the best way to preserve a passion.
It makes you wonder what else he might have created if he'd had more time. But even within music, his impact was huge.
From his songwriting to his activism, he pushed boundaries and challenged the status quo.
And left behind an incredible body of work.
Absolutely. And it's not just about John. The Beatles as a whole, they changed music forever.
Their influence is undeniable. They showed how music can transcend cultures, bring people together.
And each Beatle brought something unique to the table. Their individual talents, even their clashes, created something truly special.
It's the magic that happens when the right people come together at the right time. Speaking of special, Hey Bulldog is a bit of a hidden gem in their catalog.
It is, tucked away on the Yellow Submarine soundtrack.
It's notable for a couple of reasons. First, Paul's bass playing is incredible.
So funky, so driving, it's the backbone of the song.
And second, is one of the last songs they recorded as a truly unified band.
You can feel the energy, the camaraderie, they're playing as one.
It makes you appreciate those moments even more, knowing what was coming.
But their legacy, the music they gave us, that will last forever.
And it's not just the music. It's the stories, the glimpses into their lives.
They remind us that even legends are real people, with hopes and dreams and struggles just like us.
And through those stories, we can appreciate their legacy on a deeper level.
Absolutely. It's not just about the music, it's about the human experience.
Well said. You know, it's amazing to think that Paul McCartney's son, James, and daughter, Stella, recently went to a Donny Harrison concert.
Really? That's wonderful.
Donny, George's son, of course. It's nice to see that bond between the families still exists.
It speaks to the lasting impact of their father's friendship, their shared journey.
The Beatles' story didn't end with their breakup. Their influence lives on through their families, their fans, and all the artists they inspired.
It's a legacy that keeps unfolding, a testament to the power of music to connect generations.
And it's not just about the big names and famous moments. There are so many hidden stories within their history.
Like John Lennon's love for Rock Lobster and how it connected to Yoko Ono's music.
Shows how inspiration can come from anywhere.
And how music can bridge genres, creating these unexpected connections.
Makes you wonder what other hidden gems are out there, just waiting to be found.
It's a never-ending journey of discovery. And that's the beauty of the Beatles. There's always something more to learn.
It's true. And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding.
Uncovering those hidden treasures, seeing familiar stories in a new light.
It's a chance to gain a deeper understanding of the people behind the music.
The music that changed the world.
Exactly. And with that, we'll wrap up part 1 of our Beatles deep dive.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll uncover even more fascinating stories and insights.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our Beatles deep dive.
We're picking up right where we left off, exploring those fascinating little details about the Beatles that you might not know.
And we're still talking legacy. It's amazing how their music bridged generations. Like, remember Frank Sinatra covering Yesterday?
Yeah, Sinatra, the ultimate crooner, embracing a Beatles song. That was huge.
It really was. You know, Sinatra was initially pretty critical of the Beatles.
Oh yeah, he wasn't a fan of the long hair and all that.
But even he had to admit, Yesterday, that song is just pure magic. It connected with people on such a deep level.
It's like it transcended genres, generations, everything. It just became a classic.
Exactly. And speaking of unexpected connections, John Lennon was a big fan of the B-52s.
Really? The B-52s?
Yeah, he loved their song Rock Lobster. He even compared it to Yoko Ono's music.
Wow, I never would have guessed that. But it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, they were both pushing boundaries, experimenting with sound in a way that wasn't really being done at the time.
It's a reminder that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And speaking of unexpected, remember we were talking about that EMI recording console, the one used for Abbey Road?
The TG12345.
That's the one. It recently sold for a hefty sum.
It's more than just a piece of equipment, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a historical artifact. Think about all the music that passed through that console, the Beatles, their solo projects, so many iconic recordings.
It's like a silent witness to musical history.
Exactly. It's no wonder it sold for so much.
It makes you wonder what other tangible pieces of Beatles history are out there.
Oh, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff tucked away in studios and private collections. Instruments, handwritten lyrics, who knows what else.
It's a whole world of memorabilia just waiting to be discovered.
And speaking of discoveries, I was fascinated by the story of that Rare Help album that sold recently.
The one signed by all 4 Beatles.
That's the one. The original owner got those signatures as a teenager back in Liverpool. Can you imagine?
What a story. It's like holding a piece of Beatlemania in your hands.
It really is. And it speaks to that early connection they had with their fans.
Before they were global superstars, they were just four lads from Liverpool signing autographs for excited teenagers.
Exactly. And those kinds of personal stories, they add another layer to their legacy.
They remind us that even legends started somewhere, that they were once just ordinary people with dreams.
And speaking of dreams, let's talk about the end, the final song on Abbey Road. It was their intentional farewell, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's such a powerful song, and the way it's structured, it's like they're saying goodbye in stages.
Starting with Ringo's drum solo, then those trading guitar licks between George and Paul, and finally, that beautiful fade out with the message of love and reciprocity.
It's like they're saying, we're moving on, but the love remains.
And musically, it's brilliant. It encapsulates everything that made the Beatles so great: the tight harmonies, the innovative arrangements, the raw emotion.
It's a fitting end to their incredible journey as a band.
But it wasn't the end of their individual journeys, was it?
No, not at all. Each of them went on to have fascinating solo careers, full of ups and downs, experiments, and reinventions.
And we'll dive into all of that in part 3 of our Beatles deep dive.
Stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break.
Welcome back to our deep dive on the Beatles.
All right, we're wrapping up our Beatles journey today.
And we've covered so much. Their early days, the creative tensions, their solo careers.
The pranks, the personal struggles, even their spiritual explorations.
But through it all, their music remained this constant force, connecting with people across generations and cultures.
It's true. Their songs are like part of our collective memory, They've been the soundtrack to so many lives.
Absolutely. And what stands out to you the most from all this? Anything that really surprised you?
Honestly, learning about John Lennon's distrust of doctors and modern medicine, that was pretty unexpected.
Yeah, it's a side of him we don't often hear about.
It reminds us that even these iconic figures, they're complex individuals, just like us.
Exactly. They had their own beliefs, their own struggles.
It's what makes their stories so relatable, I think.
Absolutely. And that's what makes their music so powerful, too. It connects with those universal human experiences.
Love, loss, joy, hope. It's all there in their songs.
And that's why they continue to resonate with people today. Those emotions are timeless.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
I think it's the reminder that even though the Beatles disbanded decades ago, their music, their spirit, it lives on.
Through their families, their fans, the countless artists they've inspired.
Their story is a testament to the power of creativity, to its ability to break down barriers and connect hearts.
It's inspiring to see how their legacy continues to unfold. And who knows what other discoveries are out there waiting to be made.
That's the beauty of it, right? The exploration never truly ends. There's always something more to learn, more connections to make.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure exploring all this with you. Thanks for sharing your insight.
My pleasure. Always a joy to talk about the Beatles.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
And remember, the music never stops. Keep listening, keep exploring, keep the spirit of the Beatles alive.
Until next time.